time now for the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. And now, here she is, the smart, the sexy, the savvy, divine Miss C.
To the show. Today is a Masters and Legends special. I'm privileged to have Grammy Award-winning musician Ricky Kedge calling in from India, and we're going to talk about his life and his music. I'm really honored to have you, Ricky, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It's an absolute honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Well, you know, I'm also a musician, Ricky, so my favorite shows are the ones where I get to interview musicians, and I've never had a Grammy Award winner, so I really am honored. And I want to start back with your childhood. I mean, how old were you when you became interested in music?
I guess I've always been interested in music. It started off with me just listening to music, and I started playing music, and I picked up my first instrument, that was the guitar, when I was maybe in the 5th grade, and and then it just catapulted from there. I got very serious about music when I was in high school, and when I was in college, that's when I decided that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and this is how I want to make my money. This is how I want to make my living, and I don't want to do anything else for the rest of my life.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. A lot of the professional musicians that make it say that kind of thing. In other words, they just knew it was their gut instinct that was they were born to do. Now, you also play the piano, correct?
Yes, that's actually my main instrument right now.
Okay, and did you have family members that were musicians?
Not at all. I come from a family of doctors. So my father is a 3rd generation doctor, and he was a doctor for many, many years in North Carolina, and that's where I was actually born. And when I was about 8 years old, that's when my whole family decided to move back to India, and since then I've been living in India.
Gotcha. Well, I found this very interesting when I read a bit about you. You have a degree in dentistry.
Yes, and
go ahead.
So that's actually a pretty funny thing, if I may say so, because what happened was that, as I told you, my father is a 3rd generation doctor, and when I told my parents when I entered college that this is exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I want to be a musician, and I don't want to do anything else. That's when they thought I was absolutely crazy, and that's the thing about Indian parents, that they cannot see beyond a professional degree, beyond a traditional career rather. And so I had to make a deal with my father that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery, and once I finish off my degree, I can do whatever I wanted with the rest of my life. So I actually went to dental surgery college. I finished off my degree. I gave the certificate to my father, and I got into music full time. So I did not practice even for a single day, nor was there ever any intention to practice.
Wow, that's amazing. And I can remember my parents were not too happy when I said I wanted to go on to college for music, because I think it's a tough career choice, right? You really have to get there. It's not just an instantaneous type situation.
Yeah, it's about fear, actually. It's all about choosing between fear and passion, because I understand where my parents were coming from, that they were fearful about my future. They were fearful about me standing up to society, or what they would talk to their relatives or their friends about my career and stuff. So it was a lot of fear that drove their decisions, and I believe that passion is also equally important. So it's all about a choice that all of us have to make, between being fearful for our lives and fearful of our future, or actually choosing passion as a driving force in our lives.
I like that answer. And so your parents, I'm sure, are very proud of you now.
Yeah, now they are.
I think that's a great story. You're completely self-taught. You never had any formal music education. So talk a little bit about how you taught yourself.
Initially, actually, yeah, that's true that I was self-taught, in the sense that when I was in high school and stuff, I was already winning a lot of awards in music as being a keyboard player in a band. But then when I decided to take up music professionally, and I decided that this is exactly what I'm going to do, I felt that I have a huge handicap by not having an education in music. And that's when I actually started learning what we call Western classical music, and what you guys call just classical music. So
Right.
I actually studied the piano through the London School of Music, and I also studied Hindustani classical music, which is the Indian form of the North Indian form of classical music, under the able guidance of a Guruji in India. So yeah, so I'm a student of both worlds of Indian classical music and Western classical music, and I think it's really important for all musicians, in my opinion, to have a musical education, because the arts is all about breaking the rules and finding your own path. But at the same time, the cliche goes that that you have to know the rules in order to break them, and I find that to be very important.
Right, the fundamentals of music theory. Now, you're talking about Western classical music versus what we call classical music here, and also studying, the Hindu style. So, in your country, are the scales different than they are in America?
Actually, the basic rules of music are pretty much universal. It's just that in India, the way we define scales is very different from how they do in the West, from Western classical music. In India, we've got something known as rags, which are very intricately and well-defined scales, which are many in number. Nobody really knows how many rags exist, because different schools of thoughts have got different numbers of rags and different kinds of rags. So the thing is that so it's all about learning as many rags as possible and improvising within the framework of those rags. So that's what Hindustani classical music is all about. It's about figuring out or learning those particular well-defined scales and improvising within those scales. And it's funny that the scales are not, even though they're defined by ascending and descending notes, like how scales are defined like in Western classical music. In Indian classical music, it's more about the feel of the scales. Like you have some scales which are played mainly in the mornings, some scales which are played when you are sad, some scales which are played when you are happy, some scales that are played only during springtime, some scales that you play when you're in love. So, so it's defined by the emotion that the scale brings about rather than, just the notes.
Well, I just learned something new from that. I didn't know all of that, and I find that to be very interesting, because when you listen to music in other countries, it has like a different flavor than it does here in America.
True, and that's also sort of compounded by the fact that Indian classical music is not, even though it is defined by the usual 12 notes that any other form of music has. Indian classical music also, through improvisation, brings about a whole lot of quarter tones and bridges between notes. So because most of our instruments, the notes can be bent or they are fretless. So the thing is that there's a lot more versatility that can be brought about, just like how you would have with a slide guitar or a dobro or something like that, where the sort of like the incidentals and the in between notes also play a very important part in the actual playing style.
It almost makes me think here in America of the blues style.
Exactly.
It's its own scale, and people improvise if they know that particular scale.
Exactly. You've really hit it on the nail, yeah.
Okay, good. I got one right here. Okay. Now,
I have a question for him.
Oh, sure. Jeff has a question.
Hi, Ricky. I have a question. With you writing your music, do you find any of it has a Western influence because you were here for a while?
I mean, for sure. Not just because I was there for a while. I guess I was too young when I was in America during my formative years. But it's also because of the kind of programming that we have in India, in the sense that all of us are huge fans of all the television programming, like, for example, the Game of Thrones and and the Big Bang Theory and Friends and Two and a Half Men. So we're huge fans of that, and all of us grew up watching that. And it's the same thing with Hollywood movies. Hollywood movies are extremely popular over here, and I watch a whole lot of Hollywood movies and foreign cinema and art house cinema and stuff like that. So so the influence always creeps in, because to me, music is always a summation of what I am as a person and my feelings and emotions at that particular point in time. And I am very influenced by everything around me, and a whole lot of that is stuff that comes out of America, which I'm proud to be influenced by.
Okay, good. And now, do you have perfect pitch?
No, I cannot claim to have that.
Okay. I know it's rare, but you must have high relative pitch, is my guess, if you're able to, when you come up with the melody, how are you coming up with the melody? It's based on that emotion that you feel.
Exactly. So the melody is the first thing that usually comes up, in the sense that it's based on an emotion that I feel, and it's all about translating that emotion into, the language of music. And so that's the first step. And then after that, everything thickens up with arrangements and with all the paraphernalia around it, and trying to put it into a vehicle which can be called a proper song or a track.
All right. So when you're writing a song and you come up with that melody, we were talking about music theory, and typically when you compose a song, there's usually a standard set of chord progressions. I don't like to say standard, but there sometimes is a set chord progression to make it into a song. Otherwise, if it doesn't have some type of structure, it doesn't sound like a song. So when you compose, do you utilize some type of a chord structure?
Yes, that's very important because that's part of the arrangement. So once I create a melody line, then the next step is to create the arrangements around it. So that's when the chords come in. That's when the scoring comes in. That's when the other instruments come in. So the thing is that so I feel that a melody line needs to be presented. Once a melody is composed, it needs to be presented in the best possible way. So sometimes a presentation can be like in a hip hop form, or it could be in an EDM form, or it could be or the best way to present it would be with a string section or a complete orchestra. So it's all about dressing up the song in the best, dressing up the melody rather in the best possible way, so that the entire gamut of it brings about the emotion that I was trying to translate in the first place.
Gotcha. Well, what I want to do, I want to actually listen to one of your audio clips for a moment, and then you can talk about it.
Perfect.
Okay, you can.
There is no life we cannot live, and together every star belongs to us.
Okay, Ricky. Well, Jeff and I are sitting here listening, and we're mesmerized. And so Jeff actually has a question for you before I start asking you more questions.
First of all, I've subscribed, so I'm now one of your subscribers. I like it very much. It immediately upon listening to it, I noticed I had bits and pieces of Enya and the Cranberries, the melodic, echoing, haunting sounds of a female voice, and I really find that attractive. Was that deliberate, or just is that in your head?
That was actually in my head because the whole thought process behind that song was, or rather the whole album was basically the ideals of peace, love and tolerance by Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. Mm-hmm. So just to go back a little bit, the album was called Winds of Samsara, and I collaborated with a South African flute player on the album. And so that's why his father of the nation was Nelson Mandela. My father of the nation is Mahatma Gandhi. So the whole album was based on the ideals of peace, love and tolerance of these two great men. And Mahatma Gandhi had once said that in the creation, the divine is immanent in the earth, water and air, fire and space, and in every tiniest atom of this universe. So that's where the phrase "pieces of heaven" came across, which is the main hook line of the song. So I first came up with this melody line, and I came up with the idea of Pieces of Heaven, that I wanted to translate a melody which is sort of emotional, which talks about, all of us have a place in the universe and all of us are equally important as humans, and that's why the whole human race can live as one. And that's when I got in touch with the singer Alexis, who's got a beautiful, beautiful voice, and then she wrote all the lyrics around the Pieces of Heaven.
Very beautiful, very melodic and haunting in its own way.
Thank you.
Definitely enjoy it. Well, I know obviously you told us you do have some background in composing music because that's what you're doing. But how did you get into the spotlight as far as being recognized for your work? How did you get from where you first started? What was your path like to get to where you are now?
So briefly it was that when I was in college, I was playing in a couple of rock bands. Through that, I started doing a lot of advertising jingle work. So that's something that I still do on a very regular basis. So in the last 16 years of my career, I've had more than 3,000 placements in various television commercials all over the world. And so then from the rock band, I went into composing music for advertising commercials and television commercials. And that is when I did my first album, which was an album called Communicative Art, which was again sort of like an East and West fusion album. And that album got recognized by a record label in Los Angeles by a person called Rod Lynham, who was who's now the ex-vice president of Universal Music. And he's the one who sort of like encouraged me to make my music more international and try to sell my music outside of India and try to travel all over the world and find my audiences everywhere in the world. And that's what I started doing. I started traveling all over the world, and I started trying to find my audiences over there, try to find record companies which would sort of which would be on the same thinking wavelength as me and my music. And and then things just kept snowballing from there, and that's where I am right now.
That's amazing. Now, what is your use of digital technology?
It's quite widely used by me, in the sense that that's something that I rely on a lot, in the sense that it's a very, very good compositional tool for me. But at the end of the day, digital technology for me is limited in the final product, in the sense that it's used a lot as a compositional tool and a lot as a sketching tool for me to make my demos. And then slowly, whatever I do using digital technology is replaced by real musicians and orchestras. And then by the end of it, when the final product is created, very little of the initial use of the digital technology ends up on the final record, unless it is essential. Like, for example, if it's a dance music record or it's an advertising jingle which requires a lot of techno elements, then of course the digital technology stays back right up to the end. But at the end of the day, it's all about the composition for me, and I just use whatever technology or whatever kind of musicians or whatever kind of scoring techniques to achieve the end result that I look at from an emotional perspective.
Now, you brought up an interesting point here, because when you record music digitally, say using your keyboard with the different sounds versus having actual performers play it, being a musician, I do hear a difference. I can usually pick out whether it's digital or whether it's actually a band. But I'm curious. I'm wondering if non-musicians can actually hear the difference or not.
Oh, I'm sure they can. Yeah, because the soul of music cannot be replaced with digitizing. Music from the mouth, the heart, the soul of the person cannot and never will be digitized.
Yeah, so for me, in my opinion, when it comes to the pure sound of it, the texture of the instrument and the pure sound of it, digital technology can pretty much replicate what an instrument sounds like. But what it cannot replace is basically the musician himself or herself. For example, I could play a flute on the keyboard and it could sound absolutely like a real flute, and a whole lot of non-musicians or even musicians could actually be fooled into believing that it's a real flute. But the whole idea of getting a musician, and the reason why I will always get a musician into the studio to replace that track is because that's when the magic happens in a musical recording, where I'm not just getting the flute player's flute into my track, but I'm also getting his head into the track. I'm getting his thought process. I'm getting his life experiences into my music. And sometimes, if the musician just improvises, and brings in their set of improvisational skills into it, then I can be surprised as to how good my own composition could sound with a little bit of lateral thinking from another head. So that's the whole idea. It's all about bringing magic, and because if I do something myself, then where's the sense in it? Because everything is just too linear. Everything is just the way that I want it to be, and there's no fruit in. There's a lot more fruit in a more collaborative experience where more musicians come in. I give them the freedom to improvise and bring in some magic into a composition which would normally not have that magic.
All right. Well, I want you to stay with us. We're going to go to a short commercial break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Central Payment, your number one credit card merchant service provider in the industry. Providing e-commerce solutions, POS systems, standalone terminals, mobile apps, and much more. Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. Looking for the lowest rates in the industry and number one customer service? Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. That's James Carner, 813-777-4332.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Are you looking for an affordable way to advertise to thousands of consumers nationally? If you own a business and didn't think you could afford radio advertising, you need to call me, Laurie Zoock, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. My show reaches thousands of people on 29 AM and FM stations nationwide, as well as through the internet. Additionally, your commercials will also be heard on all of my podcasts and throughout social media sites. Don't wait another minute. Call me at 813-777-4908. 813-777-4908. And let me bring your message to the nation and to help you gain more exposure. Welcome back. You're listening to The World of Laurie Zoock. I have Grammy Award-winning musician Ricky Kedge with me from India today. Ricky, what were we just listening to?
That was a song called The Beginning, and that's from an album of mine called Global Songscapes, which was released, I think, in about 2012. Yeah, it was just a. I mean, I was just thinking about while making that song. I think the thoughts that were going on in my head were about time and about timelessness and about the cycle of time as per Buddhist culture. And that's when I started thinking a whole lot about African chants and the marimba instruments and those kind of melodies, which were very rhythmic melodies, and that's how the song just sort of composed itself.
Sounds to me like you're translating exactly what's in your head from that emotion into the music, because that's what I hear, and I think it's beautiful. Now I want to mention, we also have a mutual musician friend that introduced us, Glenn Zatola. So I always have to ask my guests, how did you meet Glenn?
Actually, I met Glenn online on Facebook, actually, because I've been a huge fan of his work and absolutely love his playing and his musicianship, and also the feel of his playing. Because a lot of people are virtuoso, saxophone players, wind instrument players, and stuff. But he's got a certain emotional sensibility which cannot be described. Which sort of moves you, and that's why I really wanted to get in touch with him and. And I've been listening to his music for a really, really long time, and I wanted to get in touch with him. And I could not believe how humble and how down to earth he was, and how approachable he was.
Well, I think I have a special guest on the line with me. Glenn, are you there? Do we have Glenn Zatola on the line with us? Okay, well, we had Glenn try to call in. We're going to try and reconnect you because that's our little surprise for you today.
Fantastic.
Yep, so that's right. I'm going to talk and we're going to try to reconnect with him. Yep, so the 3,000 ad jingles. Oh, we have Glenn back on the line? Yes. Okay, Glenn, can you hear me?
I hear you, Laurie. Ricky, hi.
Hi, Glenn. So nice to hear your voice.
Yes, for sure. I was listening to your show a little bit as I was waiting, and I wanted to say something about your musicianship.
Yeah.
I'm a jazz player, and one of the things that I've always tried to forward is the aesthetics of music. And your music is so aesthetic. The album that you won the Grammy on, for example, so beautiful and so aesthetic. I think the world really, really needs that, regardless of what kind of music one is playing. The world really needs that kind of beauty and aesthetics with what's going on,
Thank you so much for saying that, Glenn.
Oh, it's very beautiful. I mean, and as Laurie mentioned, that comes from the person themselves. That comes from the person's soul,
Right. Well, you listen to the music nowadays that for example, the younger generation listens to, and I think, oh my gosh, what do they possibly see or hear in that music? Because most of it is, I can't even use the word I'm thinking of. Most of it just is not that good. So I don't understand the popularity of bad music when we have such beautiful music in the world.
I agree with you at many levels, because what's happening now is that music is made for immediate consumption, just like a fast-moving consumer good. And what happens is that when music is made for fast consumption, then it leaves your mind equally fast. So gone are the days when music was made to grow on a person, and it was made to be timeless. Because right now nobody cares about the timeless quality of music. Everybody wants music that seeps in immediately, and then and is knocked off your phone or knocked off your MP3 player in about 3 months, and a new piece of music is put in instead.
Yeah,
so true, Ricky. That's so true. Well, a lot of it is we live in different times, and the music is very much these days driven by corporate interests, and they're selling it like you would sell McDonald's or the latest iPhone or whatever. Nothing wrong with that, but I feel art shouldn't be in that arena.
Well, look at what kids are doing now for music. That's part of the problem, I think, and not all the schools now. I don't know in India, Ricky, but I know in the United States, a lot of the schools cut their music programs, so the kids don't even have a chance necessarily to learn or be inspired by somebody like you or Glenn.
That's true. In India too, most schools do not have a music program, and so what happens is that the parents who are interested in in their children having a music education, usually have to get a private tutor or get them to study under what we call a guruji for Hindustani classical music. But I think that it's very, very important to teach music at a very fundamental level, because it helps in the overall growth of the child, and also it helps them to appreciate music, which at least started off as an art form, and I hope it remains an art form.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Well, in the old days, as you know, Ricky, the times of Mozart, music, people would take up music even if they weren't professionals, because it was part of culture. It was part of being cultured, learning an instrument, etc. I had an interesting thing, Ricky. I did my first master class out of college here, and I've kept away from jazz education like the plague. Everything I learned was on the bandstand. But anyway, I was really shocked that the kids really, really understood when I presented it to them. They understood what I was trying to say. I played for them some things, and they said, "Oh my God, I hear you have space in your music," like they never heard space before.
Yeah.
And that was amazing to me. But when they were presented with another alternative, and I was explaining it to them about space and something Benny Goodman told me, less is more.
Yeah.
They understood it. They really responded, and I was surprised. I didn't expect that. And that's some of the stuff I love in your music, and I have to applaud you because you won a Grammy. You've been able to break through the clutter with your album. Well done.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I mean, it means a lot coming from you, this praise, because I totally look up to you, and I'm a huge fan of your music, so it means a lot coming from you.
And what you've done, and the other thing, what you've done with your fame, I applaud you in your country. I've been following everything you've been doing and all the dignitaries that you meet with. It's a wonderful thing how you're, as Suzanne Summers used to tell me, it really matters how you use your celebrity status.
Thank you.
You're doing a wonderful stuff in India.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to leave you guys to finish the interview. I just want to say hello and tell Laurie and tell you how much I admire your work, Ricky, and how I applaud all your successes. It's so well-deserved.
Very grateful.
Thank you, Glenn, for calling in.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Well, I love Glenn. He's a wonderful musician, so I wanted to set up that little surprise for you since he was our contact.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Now, and I want to talk, you mentioned earlier jingles. Now, I would have loved to have been a jingle writer. What kind of jingles who have you done jingles for? Maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a fun part of music, even though that's the commercial part.
Yeah, true. It started off as, something to pay my bills and stuff. Enjoy doing jingles because the thing about the fun part about jingles is that every day is a new challenge, and each jingle usually the work process lasts for about maybe a day or for a maximum of 2 days. And let's say today I get to do a hip hop jingle, tomorrow an EDM jingle, day after tomorrow a Celtic folk jingle, then an Oriental jingle. So it keeps you on your toes when it comes to different genres of music and different styles of music. And at the same time, you get to meet all these musicians from all over the world because you need to collaborate with them. And all those different influences end up becoming your own sensibilities for your own music. And so it's an amazing process. And talking about who I do my jingles for, I do a whole lot of jingles in Asia for all the brands like Toyota, for Google, for Intel, for Microsoft, for Coca-Cola, for even Pepsi, a whole lot of people, yeah.
So how did you get those connections to be able to do that? You have to be pretty well connected to get those types of gigs.
What happened, that I could call it luck or I could call it hard work or whatever, but the thing is that it just fell on my lap. That's all I can say about it. Because what happened is that I got it started off in a very simple way. A new radio station started in India when I was just starting off into music professionally 16 years back. And I did a couple of jingles for that particular radio station. One person called another person and said that, you should work with this guy. And then I started doing jingles for them. And then my first breakthrough happened when I did a jingle for Toyota. And then Toyota started working with me regularly. And then they made phone calls. And then a person from Toyota left the job and joined Pepsi. And then I started doing a whole lot of work for Pepsi. So everything just, spread around. And and I just got very lucky.
Yeah, that and the skill of what you do, because those connections, I think, are an important part, in
Of course.
in helping you, as well as having fantastic music. Let me talk about the songs that you've written. What kind of airplay did your songs initially get? Did they start out being played in India, and then eventually expand to other countries?
No, actually, the thing about India is that India is primarily a Bollywood market. That is, the only music that is played on radio in India is either from, is from the movie industry, because all our movies have got songs and they've got a score. So the thing is that all our movies in India are musicals, just like how you would have Moulin Rouge or or Chicago or something like that,
Right.
where the movies actually have songs in them. So every single one of our movies have got songs, and those are the only songs that are played on radio and television. So there is actually no proper independent music scene in India. It keeps coming up in bursts, and there are a couple of independent musicians, but their music never sees the light of mainstream in India. In the beginning, it was just struggling a lot with my independent albums and trying to find an audience for myself. But then my audience started becoming wider and wider when I started traveling all over the world and I started meeting people all over the world. But then when I started seeing a lot of success internationally, that is when people in India started taking me more seriously.
That's I mean, I just think it's amazing that you do all this, and like I say, is wow. I'm actually speechless. But you're also an advocate for anti-piracy laws in India. Now, I know what that is, but maybe you can explain a little bit about anti-piracy and how it hurts composers and musicians.
It does hurt composers and musicians in a very big way. Now, the thing is that just like how I mentioned, this could be pretty controversial, but this is what I normally talk about whenever I get the chance to. That the thing about India is that in India we do not have a proper collection rights society. Like in America, you have these collection rights societies like BMI and ASCAP, which actually help musicians collect their royalties from different places, like for example from radio or streaming royalties and stuff like that. And that's why a musician can have a regular source of income through their music. But in India, we don't have any such thing. So the thing is that, as I mentioned to you, the major music content provider in India is the movie industry. Now, the movie industry does not make money through the sales of CDs and cassettes, or they do not make money through the sales of music or even through iTunes or anything like that. They make their money through the sales of movie tickets. So what happens is that for them, the music in the movie is actually an advertising media for the sales of movie tickets. So just like how in America, Hollywood movies would not bother about their trailers being pirated, like that in India, the movie industry does not care about their music being pirated, because if the music gets pirated and reaches out to a larger audience, it's good for them because they're going to sell more movie tickets. So that is why in India, there is no proper laws. There are no proper anti-piracy laws, and even the small anti-piracy laws that exist are not executed well, because the major content provider for music, that is the movie industry, does not care about piracy, because they are in love with piracy, because they just want the music to spread far and wide so that they can sell more movie tickets.
Well, wait a minute. How do you then, as a composer, how do you get paid? Just through the percentage of the movie tickets? You get a certain percentage?
No, not at all. If you are composing, because I, out of protest, do not compose music for films in India for the same reason. But the thing is that if a composer composes for a movie, then they just get a one-time fee, and then they just have to say bye-bye to the music. So they do not have any control over what happens to the music. They do not have any control over the royalties. They don't have any control over the music being used in another movie or in a television commercial. Nothing.
Wow, because I mean, in the United States, you basically copyright your music. You with the Library of Congress, you're protecting that music, but you don't have that at all. I didn't know that you didn't have that at all in India. So I guess there are composers willing to go ahead and just do this, but maybe it's not such a good idea because they're not really getting paid any money for all the time they spent. They're not getting any royalties.
No royalties. They just get a one-time fee, and most musicians in India are happy with a one-time fee. So that's the reason why it is difficult for us to actually bring in a collection rights society or any laws, because everybody is just happy with the status quo.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I know. Jeff and I are standing. You're looking at each other, going, "How can that be?" So, how do you protect your rights? I know you have something like 13 albums. How do people buy your albums? Do they buy digital downloads? How does it work for you?
So basically, what I do is that I do not do the primary release in India. I usually do the primary release either in Europe or Australia or America. And then what I do is that, and my distribution, my worldwide distribution originates from a foreign country. And then for India, what I do is that I usually I do not give my streaming rights to any Indian label, nor do I give any physical distribution rights to any Indian label. So I try to control it in the best possible way. But even then, I end up getting cheated all the time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, how do you find
Yeah.
out if somebody is using your music? I guess there's no legal way in India to just stop them from using it.
No, there's no legal way, and it's almost impossible to stop them. And even if you do find out, which is a very rare thing if you find out, because India is a huge country in the sense that we've got 1.3 billion people and a whole lot of television channels and radio channels, so it's impossible to track everything. But even if we do find out anything, I mean that the court cases would go on for maybe decades. Like so. So probably my children and my grandchildren would be still fighting the cases. So.
Are you
So-
monetized on YouTube because you have so many hits? I'm looking at 188,697, and you have commercials on there. Are you at least monetized?
Yeah, but that's monetized out of an American agency, not out of an Indian agency.
So at least you're getting paid for your work. And
No, of course, I'm getting paid for all my work because I'm not working in the movie industry. So basically, I'm getting paid just like how an American would get paid.
Okay.
So because I'm signed up with BMI, I'm signed up with the American Collection Rights Society. So I'm pretty much protected because I've refused to work with the movie industry.
Gotcha. I think that's
Yeah.
good, and maybe
Yeah.
things will change there. But I didn't know that until you said that today. Now, I want to ask you, what is hopefully I'm saying this right, the Majali Music Trust?
Yes,
What-
exactly.
What is that?
So the Majoli Music Trust is a not-for-profit organization which was started by my music teacher, Nisia Majoli. She taught me the piano, and so the organization is named after her, and it was sort of her brainchild which I have supported. So for the exact same reason that that Indian musicians do not get paid royalties of any kind. So what happens is that for any reason, if a musician is infirm or has an infirmity or due to old age cannot perform anymore, their income is completely cut off. So in order to help them, we've set up this trust where what we do is we select such deserving musicians who require monetary help, and we give them a pension fund for life. So what we normally do is that we select about between 3 to 6 musicians every year, and we give them a pension fund for life, which usually covers their food bills and their medical bills.
Well, I want to ask you one more question also before we go to a quick break. You created a patriotic song as well?
I do that pretty often from time to time.
Okay.
So I've created quite a few patriotic songs for India, because I believe that patriotism should come from within and it should not come at the expense of another country. So I love composing music which brings in an inherent feeling of patriotism within India, and I love doing that. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to go to a quick break, Ricky, so stay with us. Back in just a moment.
am di borom belel faal njaga yaaram be may nu baax may nu leer yërmande la ni ñaane yal na nu ko yàlla buur bi may ndax ñun ñi ñoo gëm yaa rasulillah yee bàyyi Fatima tey ma jiin la yaa nabi yàllaay ndigal faal borom leeyee
Central Payment, your number one credit card merchant service provider in the industry. Providing e-commerce solutions, POS systems, standalone terminals, mobile apps, and much more. Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. Looking for the lowest rates in the industry and number one customer service? Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. That's James Carner, 813-777-4332.
Are you looking for an affordable way to advertise to thousands of consumers nationally? If you own a business and didn't think you could afford radio advertising, you need to call me, Laurie Zoock, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. My show reaches thousands of people on 29 AM and FM stations nationwide, as well as through the internet. Additionally, your commercials will also be heard on all of my podcasts and throughout social media sites. Don't wait another minute. Call me at 813-777-4908, 813-777-4908, and let me bring your message to the nation and to help you gain more exposure. Welcome back to the world of Laurie Zoock. My special guest, Ricky Kedge, Grammy Award winning musician. And talk about that Grammy Award. How did that feel to walk up on that stage? Because I saw that video of you and you looked so excited.
Yeah, of course it was. It's pretty much indescribable, the moment. And it's like, you know how they say that when a person is in a life and death situation, their whole life flashes before their eyes. It was exactly like that for me, where my entire musical career, you know, from the time I first picked up a guitar to the time I first played like jingle bells on the guitar,
Right,
and,
right.
to the time, like, you know, through all the hardships of actually recording that album and traveling all over the world, and you know, and going broke recording that album. So everything just sort of like, you know, came together in a flash, and it was pretty much indescribable in the sense that the feeling of accomplishment and the feeling of being accepted, you know, and the feeling of you know, that suddenly it's seeping in that, you know, I made the right decision, you know, I was born to do this, you know.
Excellent answer. I would have passed out walking up on that stage, but I think you did a great job. Now, you got that award for your album Winds of Samsara. What inspired you to write that album specifically? And also, I want you to talk about your amazing flute player.
Yeah, so Winds of Samsara, I mean, it started off a couple of years back. I was a huge fan of Wouter Kellerman's flute playing, and I got in touch with him. I think it was in about 2011. I got in touch with him, and I was pretty surprised that he had coincidentally listened to an album of mine called Mesmerizing Flute, which I did with Universal Music, and which was about the Indian flute, that is the bamboo flute. And he was a huge fan of that album. And both of us connected on that, and you know, and we decided that we wanted to work with each other. And while we were discussing about how we would work with each other, we realized that I had written a song about Mahatma Gandhi and my father of the nation, and he had written a song about Nelson Mandela, who was his father of the nation. And we also realized that Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, so there was a lot of Indianness in Nelson Mandela, there was a lot of South Africanness in Mahatma Gandhi. So I sent my song to him, he sent his song to me, I added Indianness to his composition, he added South Africanness to my composition, and in doing this we created a whole lot of other music, and we just traveled all over the world. We became the best of friends, and in 2.5 years, we had a whole album ready.
Yeah, your music blends well together.
Yeah, it does, and we were pretty amazed by how much we complemented each other, and and how my strengths were his weaknesses, and his weaknesses were my strengths, and everything just worked out, and it worked so cohesively.
Now, what projects are you currently working on? What can we expect from you?
I just finished an album called Shanti Samsara. This was an album which I created for presentation at the COP21 summit. That is the recently concluded climate change conference which happened in Paris. So this was an album which I'd created for the conference, which was presented over there, and they played the music videos there, and they played the music from the album through the conference. And so climate change has been something that I've been very, very passionate about. And fortunately, last year after I won the Grammy, a whole lot of people started taking me seriously when I was talking about it. And I translated all these emotions and all these thoughts and philosophies into music. And I'm very, very grateful that it was actually presented and launched at the climate change conference by the Indian Prime Minister, by the French President, and in the presence of the United Nations General Secretary Ban Ki-moon. And the album took a life of its own after that. And so I'm going to be dedicating the next couple of years of my life to spreading awareness and consciousness about climate change. And that's my mission right now.
That's great. Well, I'm very honored to have had you on the show. And I want to give you the opportunity, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach you? Do you have a website?
Yeah, my website has got a way to contact me, and it's got all my other contact details. It's www.rickykej.com. And of course, a very, very simple way to contact me is to drop a message on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Ricky Cage Music. That's RICKYKEJ music.com. Ricky Cage Music, sorry.
That's all right. I'm already a fan. I've already hit liked on your Facebook page. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a privilege, and hopefully I'll get to speak to you again at some point.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and it's been an absolute honor, and it's been a very, very fun interview, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're very welcome. We're going to go out with some music from your Winds of Samsara and join us next week on The World of Laurie Zoock.